Today is Tuesday, November 19th. It's 9 a.m. and I'm calling this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee to order. So if you're able to rise, please join me as we make our Pledge of Allegiance. Again, good morning and welcome. My name is Christine Novello. I'm a member of the Sun City West Governing Board. I'm the treasurer for this fiscal year. And as such, I am the chairperson of the Budget and Finance Committee meetings as well. I'm joined today by the members of the Budget and Finance Committee. We made full introductions during our September 3rd meeting. So if you're here or watching at home, watching on tape, and you'd like to know who we are, a little bit more about us, please feel free to head there and you'll hear more detail. We have a full quorum today, but before we get started with that, I will read a quick procedures statement that we read at the start of every meeting as I call the meeting to order. The Governing Board conducts all of its meetings, including committee meetings, in compliance with Arizona open meeting laws per ARS 33-1804, and in concert with RCSCW bylaws, policies, and standing rules. Parliamentary procedures as outlined in the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order will also be followed, consistent with Bylaw 3.07, Procedures for Owner-Member Meetings, and with Standing Rules number 2 and number 3. All questions and comments are directed to the committee chairperson, to me. All comments are entertained at the discretion of the committee chairperson. Speakers shall state their name and member number and speak in a courteous manner. The committee chairperson may limit commentary time and number of commentators, speakers on any issue. The committee chairperson also may redirect commentary at individual agenda items to the general guest comments agenda line item, except when the committee has discussed the agenda item and consensus or agreement is sought. All fire and room safety precautions and regulations are strictly obeyed at all meetings, per the guidance of Arizona Fire and Medical Authority. The committee chairperson reserves the right to adjourn any meeting if the safety of the committee, meeting attendees, or others is deemed at risk, or if there is too much disruption to continue. After one verbal warning by the chairperson, the committee chairperson also reserves the right to ask any meeting attendees to leave any meeting should their behavior be deemed dangerous or unacceptable. Disciplinary action may follow. So that statement aside, we are now called to order, and we do have a full complement of committee members here today. We have our committee members present. We also have 2 committee members who are remote today. John Click and Mickey Jacobs are joining us online, and they will participate remotely. We also have, for those of you who are watching online, we have a few of you who are logged in. If you wish to ask questions, please feel free to use the chat function within YouTube. YouTube dictates how to use that function. That's not something that we can help you with. I believe you can just open chat there, but please include your name and member number when you do establish a chat. We'll read those comments back. Those of you who are watching online are hearing what's going on in the room with about a 30-second delay. So please bear that in mind. If we miss your comment due to timeliness, we will get it at the end of the meeting. So with all of that, we're ready to move on to item number 2 in our agenda, which is the approval of our minutes from our last meeting, October 15th, 2024. Ask the committee, are there any objections or changes, omissions that you see? Okay, then, so we have consensus to move forward and to accept those minutes. Thank you. We'll move on now to new business. At the top of the agenda, we will be talking about our third quarter 2024 reserve fund performance. We're welcoming to the microphone representative from our CapTrust financial advisor. This is Carol Romney coming to the microphone. Before Carol starts to speak, some of us on the committee, or if you've been to these meetings before, you've met Carol before, but before she starts, I just want to give a little bit of an introduction to what we're doing today. Not only are we receiving the third quarter update, but we will also do our annual certification recommendation. Certification is simply our, did CapTrust assist us in a way that we feel is acceptable and in compliance with FI 12, our investment policy. I'm going to call the committee's and all residents' attention specifically not only to FI 12, but look specifically at Section 3.0, where we're talking about how those funds will be invested. There are a few data points there that we'll go back and recheck, and you should be doing the same as Carol makes the presentation on behalf of CapTrust to ensure that we are indeed following our policies. After we receive this presentation from Carol, ask our questions and so forth, we'll move on to the next item for certification. So I just wanted to give that little bit of an introduction and welcome back to Sun City West, Carol Romney.
Thank you for having me. And Nathan Erickson, my partner, extends his apologies. He's traveling today, and our other team member, Ryan Rafidi, has a conflict as well. Just trying to get the clicker to work here. Oh, there we go. I'll start out with just a little market commentary, then we'll go through the portfolio. And I will be touching on your policy FI 12, which is the underlying policy that feeds into the investment policy statement, which is our directive with managing the portfolio. So we'll be affirming both of those. Market commentary, bear in mind this portfolio and the numbers are of third quarter, September 30th. We've had some events since then, and we'll talk about how that may have played into your portfolio since then. Not sure if the laser, I've got this. Oh, there we go. For third quarter, once again, we're having year-to-date a really great market in the stock market. 2022, as we all know, stocks and bonds were both negative for that year. Even our most conservative portfolios, such as this one, was negative, under pressure that year. 2023, we saw recovery in the stock market, 26%, and then we also saw this year-to-date, we're up 22%. For the quarter is the striped lines, and you can see pretty much all the asset classes had a fantastic quarter. We can see that with our international markets. Small caps were up 9.3% for the quarter, and that was before the election, and post the election, they've even have continued to grow, and you have exposure to all of these asset classes in your portfolio. I mainly want to focus on the bonds because the portfolio is 90% fixed income. The Federal Reserve and their monetary policy, the actions that they're taking will impact your portfolio significantly. We saw 5.2% in the bond aggregate, which is the benchmark for the fixed income portion of your portfolio, just in third quarter. And just to point out, when you see the performance of your portfolio, I want to explain the drivers to that. September 30th of last year, our 10-year Treasury was about 4.6%. The Federal Reserve started signaling they're going to target lower interest rates, which they have done. And at that point in time, end of third quarter, the 10-year Treasury went down to 3.8%. So interest rates go down, bond prices go up, we see appreciation within your portfolio. Now, I will say right now, a lot of those gains have been erased. And one thing about this is that those longer term bonds that are more sensitive to interest rates, when interest rates go down, you'll see them go up more. Your portfolio is tilted more towards shorter duration, less sensitivity, more conservative portfolio. And I will point out here, just because the Federal Reserve and monetary policy is really making most of the shape take place in your portfolio, when we look at the yield curve for fixed income, we did see as of third quarter, interest rates dropped across the yield curve, some more than others. Your FI12 requires us to be diversified and to address duration risk and interest rate risk. And I'm just here to affirm that your portfolio does that. So depending on the securities within the portfolio, we saw some price appreciation at certain points on the curve. And it's interesting to note that the interest rate movement in the economy, we aren't really seeing a whole widening of credit spreads at this moment in time. Economic outlook. A lot of this data is of September 30th, and we've had some events since then, so we have a little more certainty. Pace of cuts are still uncertain. The Federal Reserve has targeted lower interest rates. The December cut is uncertain. We know there's a debt ceiling, tax policy. We don't have the election outcome uncertainty anymore. That was a big surprise, and we're happy that we at least know who's going to be in the White House, what administration is going to be in there. But as usual, the only thing certain is there's always uncertainty and speculation, and we don't build portfolios around speculation. We build them around stocks and bonds, how they behave in the market, and what your objectives are. With lower interest rates, we should see some of that rippling through the economy, especially small caps. We would expect them to be impacted favorably. Small caps usually have floating rate debt, and so when interest rates go down, that helps some of these companies. And we did make a tactical shift in your portfolio recently within the small cap space. So on to the portfolio for the quarter. Last 3 months, we started at 28.1 million. As we saw, bonds had just a terrific third quarter, as well as most asset classes. A net investment return of 1.3 million for the quarter, with an ending market value of almost 29.5 million. We're happy to report that since inception, we now have a net investment return as of third quarter that is positive. Now, as I mentioned, we had the 10-year treasury went down quite significantly at third quarter, so we did see quite a bit of price appreciation for the quarter. Right now, we're in the middle of the quarter, and the treasury has gone back up, so we have seen a lot of those long-term bonds lose some of that appreciation. And this is expected as we see the expectation of interest rates adjusting to what will actually materialize. Current year to date, you're up 1.6 million as of third quarter. Again, just ending at 29.5 million, and I'll put that into some yield numbers here in a moment. FI12 requires the portfolio to be invested 90% fixed income and 10% equity. We do have it invested and allocated at that amount. Technically, if you add up the equities here, we are just slightly over 10.8%. This is just a snapshot at one point in time. We engage in portfolio management as these various asset classes sort of run the race. We'll pick a point in time and we will rebalance the portfolio. Right now it is at under 10% for the equity securities. Our investment policy statement allows us to have some wiggle room there just as these various assets fluctuate throughout the quarter, but you are in compliance with the 90-10 allocation. The portfolio the FI12 requires that we preserve, have liquidity, and a reasonable rate of return that will keep up with inflation. When this portfolio was built, I'll just point out that it was really challenging to find, 2% return in any conservative, reasonable way. Since then, interest rates have gone up, and we also have the 10% equity that helps us to keep up with inflation on a long-term horizon, and I'll show how that plays out in the portfolio. I'll also mention that the investment policy statement allows for 3 to 5 year business cycle. On a 5-year rolling return, fixed income has always been positive. So the point here is just to point out that this portfolio, the way it is constructed, does keep up with your FI12 policy. FI12 policy requires no more than 20% in any single asset, and then we also address the 10% equity requirements. It requires that we are diversified across market risk, using different securities, tapping into different sectors, which is also in this portfolio reporting. It also requires that we have liquidity. These are all ETFs and mutual funds with same-day liquidity. Putting this into a yield perspective, for the quarter, we are up 4.83%. For the quarter, underperforming the benchmark, which was totally expected, as we do have shorter term duration in the portfolio by design. We are less sensitive to interest rate movements. Current yield year to date, we are the portfolio is just right around 6% there, outperforming the benchmark. Since inception, happy to report that we are positive 0.4%, whereas the total portfolio benchmark would be negative. We remain consistent with our benchmark. The fixed income is compared to the bond aggregate. The U.S. securities are compared to the Russell 3000, and international benchmark is the ACWI, All Country World Index. So we use broad benchmarks, and we stay consistent with those. I will point out in 2023, portfolio was up 7.61%. We do have that 10% allocation to equities, which did help drive some tailwinds to the portfolio. Your FI12 does require that we attempt to consider inflationary pressures. And if we were just all in fixed income conservative ag for 2023, it would have been a return about 5.53%. So I just want to point out how those equity securities do help. In down markets, obviously they will give us some headwinds. However, in up markets, and we expect stocks to go up more than bonds over a long course of time, it should give us tailwinds over a long period of time. We do have a new security. We are taking a shift. Although we're shorter duration, we did start a campaign to shift to longer duration. We are still shorter than the bond aggregate. We added in just a 5 to 10 year corporate bond ETF. You won't see any numbers there because it came in during the quarter, but its exposure is in the yields. Oops. Having trouble with the clicker today. I will affirm all of these instruments, we do watch them. They're passive investments, so the investment managers are not attempting to beat an index, but it's important to us that they track the index at a low cost, and some of them engage in securities lending, and we watch that as well. All of the underlying investments are satisfactory. Sorry, this clicker just doesn't want to work for me. Last time we showed a duration of the portfolio just under 5%. Now we're at 5.10%, and we'll continue to monitor the market and shift the duration of the portfolio. Expense ratio 0.05%, just really inexpensive, very efficient management of this portfolio at a low cost. And I also will just affirm here that you can see your FI12 requires us to be diversified across duration to manage interest rate risk. And just illustrating here that we also have exposure to various sector weightings within the portfolio as well, which FI12 requires us to manage the portfolio in that manner. And then lastly, there is a trade sheet in here just illustrating some of the moves that we have made tactfully, just going longer duration. And then also we did move into small cap value, just a very, very small percent, just less than 1%. You hardly won't even notice it in the portfolio, but given the decrease in interest rates, we think that will help out with the small cap. So we made that tactical shift as well. And I'll take questions.
Thank you very much, Carol. We're going to start with questions from the committee itself. And I would like to have the committee ask their questions before I ask any. So I'm going to go first to our remote participants because it's really hard to interject. John, did you have any questions for CapTrust?
I'm good, thank you.
I hate it. Thank you. Mickey, any questions?
No, Christine, thank you.
No problem. So then here in the room? None? Okay. Jim?
I guess my one question is, and actually I'm glad you picked that page because that's the one I wanted to see. Have we not taken the opportunity to consolidate? Because I know that per FI12 you're allowed to do 20% allocation in a fund. I guess I'm a little confused in regard, or not confused. So the Fed's lowered 75 bips and the long term's gone up. I think we're at 4.4 today or whatnot.
Correct.
And the national debt seems to be an issue in regards to fixed income long term. I'm just wondering if you guys have taken the opportunity to maybe consolidate and maximize the minimal expense with the strongest return on the shortest end of it. I mean, are we getting every drop of, because I know that FI12 really keeps your hands tight, it restricts you quite a bit. Are we getting every drop of juice out of this lemon?
We believe it is allocated in that way. So if you look at the expense ratio, they're all, as far as our fixed income securities go, most of them right in here are in 3 basis points to 6 basis points. So they don't vary that much. And yes, we did have more in the 1 to 5 year security. When you add up all the short term here, so you could look at the 1 to 5 year, the Schwab short term, we were tilted shorter term duration while also staying compliant. Because you're right, we do have restrictions. We have to be diversified across various instrument securities. So we could always look back and say, oh, we should have done this, but going forward, building the portfolio on a go-forward basis, it's diversified and aligned with FI12.
My one question would be, is like the second one from the bottom, LQD, being combined with the third one from the top, IGIB.
And again, Jim, this is out of curiosity because again, they're making these decisions. Are you wondering why this decision was made or?
Again, it's more of, are we getting every drop? I mean, we have a 3-year return of 0.4. I just wanted to make sure that we're getting every drop of juice out of this lemon that they possibly can.
I understand. And if I heard Carol correctly, they're running at an extremely low expense ratio, first of all, and there's only so much more, I believe, that we could even hope for. I understand, and we all want the same thing, and I know that CapTrust, I believe that CapTrust has been doing the same, looking for every possible drop, but
Correct. We would need a crystal ball, to get every single drop going forward. And
Okay.
so that's why it's more built around objectives. So I think it's worth a conversation though, I think the question came up last time about what's most important. Are we aligned to take advantage of, like a black swan event or something like that? And we always go back to what's your objectives? What are you trying to achieve? This portfolio was built in a very low interest rate environment. I think it's worth a conversation to review it and say, is this still, aligned?
Right.
Do you want to address FI12 and redo the investment policy statement? And we're always standing by to bring data.
Exactly.
We know we won't always be 100%, correct with our asset allocation, meaning that can we build it and get every single drop out of it going forward? Well, you can always look back and say, well, we should have done this, we should have done that, but
Right.
it doesn't matter. It's more important just to make sure that it's hitting your objectives and going to hit your cash flow requirements.
Thank you.
And Carol, just, you can, if you had the opportunity to see the rest of the agenda, you won't be here most likely because I know you have a job to return to. But we, as a committee, we are revisiting that and at least doing some analysis to ensure that we are still doing the best thing for the association, for all of us as owners. So assuming the committee moves forward, we'll be considering that after you've gone, assuming the committee does agree to move forward and to do some analysis as we've begun to discuss, then we would love to have you and your
Sure.
team's input as we move forward to evaluate the best courses of action.
That makes a
Answer
lot of
that.
sense. And I will just mention, we are fiduciaries. We work in your best interests. So we don't have conflicts of interest with, any of these names on here. The portfolio is built for you.
Yeah. Well, I had a question. Jim, did you have any others? I apologize. So you mentioned, and I believe that, you've shared with me because I've had the opportunity to speak with Cliff and with the team as well, but I just wanted to ask you here, where CapTrust has tilted us more short-term, extremely conservative. You had mentioned that there are some potential shifts. Are you considering, and I know it's always tough. We always ask our financial advisors, both personal and professional, right? So we're asking you to, I'm not asking you for a crystal ball, but are you considering any changes in terms of that tilt as we move forward into the next couple of quarters?
We're always evaluating, especially since we're post-election. We know who's going to be in the White House. We're seeing some, policies or, things being put into place. And so we're always monitoring that. And all I can say is just stay tuned. We're also pretty conservative. We always want a basis for our decisions. And it's usually based in portfolio theory, how stocks and bonds behave. And if we see activities in the market, for example, the Federal Reserve said they're going to target higher interest rates. They did. We went tactical, shorter duration, and that worked out well for us. But we don't base portfolios on speculation.
Exactly. And we're grateful for that. In our case, we have a very conservative policy. Any other questions? Then I'll open it up to our owner residents, if there are any questions. And for those of you listening online, if you have any questions, if you need more than one chat box, that's fine, but please include your name and rec card number in the chat box when you send those questions in online. And as our residents step to the microphone, I know that Mr. Lees knows the drill, but please introduce yourself by name and rec card number.
Yes, thank you very much. Bruce Lees, 135422. I'm glad that the cat finally got out of the bag. FI12 I would encourage to be revisited by the Budget and Finance Committee as well as the governing board itself. Carol is an excellent representative of CapTrust for our benefit. However, I think that they feel somewhat constrained because of the limitations placed upon them by the policies. We have nearly $29 million of money in the portfolio, but we're choosing not to put. We need to step out a little bit further and look at how we can manipulate and possibly change the policy to gain some advantage in the market conditions that I believe are going to be favorable, and the evidence should bear that out in the next 3 to 6 months. I think that we can get more bang for our buck if we allowed CapTrust some more flexibility as a result of a policy change in FY12 to actually make us some more money and save the residents and homeowners a little bit on the back end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lees. For anyone, again, who's not here, but I hope that you'll stay for the later part of the meeting where we're going to be talking in detail about how we're going to assess as a committee, how we'd like to assess FY12 and FY4, which is related. So please stay tuned. We just want to stay, we'll move in accordance with the agenda, but thanks for that. Any other questions from residents? And I see none online. Again, thank you, Carol Romney from CapTrust and the entire team. I know that you're representing a big team that's going to work for us. That's an extraordinarily, if I may say, an extraordinarily low expense ratio, and we really appreciate that, and we appreciate all your hard work. And thank you again for your excellent
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you, sir. We're moving on now to section 3.02, which is a recommendation. I'm looking for a recommendation from our Budget and Finance Committee. Basically, we do an annual certification of our reserve fund strategy, which is outlined in FY12. Carol did an excellent job of highlighting some of this, but if you were going through it yourself as I asked you to, you can see that there were, Carol made several references to how preservation of capital is being ensured. That's FY12 Section 2, ensuring that that they are addressing risk, liquidity, and rate of return. Carol addressed all of those in her presentation. And in Section 3, where we're talking about investment of funds in our current FY12, each of those items, again, Carol went through how they are only investing in U.S. Treasury, federal agency obligations. Our reserve funds are addressed, how they're actually buying all the funds and so forth. Nothing's been purchased on margin. So when I went through this, they're right at the cusp of 10% versus 90%, but they were in compliance with that in my view. Anyone on the committee see anything or have any questions about compliance with current FY12? All righty. And none from Zoom. Any questions or concerns from our residents? Then I'm looking for, would someone be willing to make a recommendation on behalf of the committee that we certify the reserve fund strategy, certify the compliance with FY12? Bueller? Anyone on the committee, if you'd be willing, just say that you're willing to make that recommendation.
I'll make that recommendation that we certify.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And we have, it's not really a motion, but did it sound like we had another recommendation or second?
Yes, it was just Mickey. I was going to recommend we accept.
Thank
We
you.
accept.
Any concerns? Then I'm going to go with a quick, this one's an important one, so I'm going to do a quick voice that you agree. Mickey, you're first?
Yes, yes.
John Click?
Yes.
Excellent. Rick?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Ed? Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Excellent. So we're unanimous in our recommendation. Thank you all, and thanks again to CapTrust for a fine job. We'll move that on, then we will recommend to the governing board that the reserve fund strategy is certified for the year. And we'll move on to item 3.03, waiting with bated breath, September and October year-to-date financials. Mr. Swan.
Wow.
I'm being very formal today, right? Mr. Swan. Thanks, Cliff.
Thank you, Director Novello, and good morning, everyone. I'm happy to present the October year-to-date financials. So let's get started. So just a quick overview, we'll talk about where we're at for the month of October and then year-to-date compared to the budget and then compared to prior year. We'll move into the summary of capital-related impacts. Again, we'll look at that compared to budget and prior year, and then we'll move down to the capital improvement budget for the year, and then finish up with the fully funded balance. So taking a look at October, 51,000 overall unfavorable to budget. We struggled a little bit in golf with the heat, the temperatures, kind of squelched events as well. And, you know, had a little bit less activity. We anticipate that demand gets kind of pent up, and as the weather has gotten better, we should see improvements in those areas. But I will say we did not sandbag the budget either, so we anticipate getting this back, but also hitting budget moving forward, but we'll see. On the expense side, a couple of big swings here. First of all, wages and benefits, 58,000 favorable compared to budget. We still do have some of those open seats, but when we get to the year-to-date numbers, I'll talk a little bit more about that. For the month, we had a big swing in our landscape maintenance. Todd and his team did a big purchase. We were running a little bit behind budget when it comes to purchasing chemicals and fertilizers. And we took advantage of a buying program that allowed us to save approximately $80,000 in fertilizers and chemicals. So we took advantage of that in October, and we'll see that swing back. But year to date, you'll see we're only 86,000 unfavorable. So it was a big swing for the month, but overall 86,000 unfavorable, and we'll get that back next month. So that's a big swing there. Down in the bottom section, 78,000 favorable. That's mostly operating expenses, and we had budgeted to replace some of our security cameras and DVRs at the rec centers, and we're running behind on that. So that favorable 78,000, 50,000 of that's for cameras that we haven't expensed yet, but we will as we move throughout the year and work through those different cameras and DVRs at the different locations. But overall, 2,000 favorable or right on budget overall for the month of October. So revenues and expenses, 754 versus 705 on the cash outflow for the month of October. Compared to prior year, big swing in those chemicals and then increases in wages and benefits, but 284 compared to prior year for the month of unfavorable compared to prior year for the month of October. Looking at year to date, 86,000 unfavorable. Most of that is coming from golf, again, weather related. So we'll assess that as we get throughout the year. It's early days still, but 86,000 unfavorable on 7.4 million in revenue. On the expense side, 180,000 favorable wages and benefits, excuse me. We're running about 7,000 hours less than budget on our payroll. Some of that's efficiencies, but I will say open seats impact that, obviously. But 180,000 favorable year to date in wages and benefits. Kind of going down the line there, utilities is a lot of that's our trash and waste savings compared to budget, as well as natural gas and telephone. APS is right on budget. but 58,000 favorable in utilities year to date. Again, we talked about the landscape maintenance and the chemicals purchase. That'll swing back year to date next month. Repairs and maintenance, fortunately, just less repairs and maintenance so far year to date compared to budget. So hopefully we'll continue to see that trend. Some of that stuff is, we don't know until it happens kind of thing. But 75,000 favorable, which is good. Supplies and services and equipment, most of that is from fuel. So fuel prices are down, which we budgeted higher fuel prices, which is good, of course. But also significant savings in office supplies and in cleaning supplies, 9,000 and 12,000 each on those. So that's just operating more efficiently compared to what we budgeted. So 70,000 favorable in supplies, services, and equipment. And then again, down in that kind of group of expense items down there, 111,000. That's 50,000 of that's just those security expenses that we talked about earlier. So overall, 329,000 favorable to budget and right on par with prior year to date, with the swings coming back in the chemicals and fertilizers next month. So looking forward to seeing what the impact of that's going to be. But the two big areas we talked about, wages and benefits, of course, budgeted over prior year, 178,000, and then in the landscape maintenance, that bulk chemical purchase to take advantage of that discount. All right, now switching to the capital related impacts, APF fees came in for October, 23,000 over budget, which is good. And, pretty much right on budget. Get down to the reserve fund performance, and Carol kind of prefaced this, but we had an unrealized loss for the month of October of 706,000. Kind of gave back some of that unrealized gain due to the long term going back up to 4.4%. But we'll continue to monitor that throughout the year. We're still positive. You'll see as we move forward in the unrealized section. 642,000 unfavorable to October budget compared to prior year. 300,000 unfavorable. Big swing right there in the unrealized loss of 300,000. But APF fees favorable to prior year, 56,000. So taking a look at year to date, APF fees favorable to budget, 33,000. Overall investment gain and loss, 138,000. We had 138,000 realized loss in the month of September. That was the shift that they decided to make and go shorter term that Carol talked about earlier. 533,000 year to date in unrealized gain, and then investment income of 331,000 year to date. So overall, 587,000 favorable to budget. And then compared to prior year, 191,000 APF favorable. You'll see the investment performance, 1.55 million over prior year positive. So total $1.6 million almost favorable to prior year in the capital section. So we talked about the APF fees. We're still 18 or 5% behind prior year in actual transactions. I will say things are picking up in November. Riley told me that they've been very busy in the membership office. As people came back, we think there was a little bit kind of a late resurgence of people coming back into the community. We think we were estimating that was due to the election and people having to get their ballots in and things where they live. So kind of slowed things up a little bit in membership, but they've picked up significantly this month. And then again, that reserve fund change of $1.5 million over prior year. So compared to budget, 916,000 favorable for overall revenues over under expenses, and then approximately 1.6 million compared to prior year. Switching to the capital improvement section, capital expenditures. So a $9.9 million capital improvement budget this year. We projected 9.76 in projected PO amounts. So 168,000 currently projected favorable variance to budget in capital improvement budget. Yes, we have a long way to go, but there's a lot of yellow highlighted.
I said it sort of under my voice. We have a long way to go. We're only a
Yes.
few months into our fiscal year, correct? That's what.
Yes, yes. But we do and we don't. So in terms of dollars, yes, because we have a $5.5 million irrigation project. But when you look at all of these projects on here that are highlighted, these are completed projects. Mr. Click asked at our last financial presentation that we add the completed project percent column. So percent of budget in terms of what percent of budget did we actually spend to complete the projects. He also asked that we add the estimated start date for the projects so that he could see, or we could see the cash, this committee could see the cash needs as we move forward. So we added those two columns on this report for that request. So with all that said, 168,000 projected in savings to budget. So switching to the allowances, we have in the budget this year 420,000 in allowances. So this is a fund that we use for unexpected capital improvements. They're pretty much items that are existing items that come up. We don't quite get the useful life out of that we thought we would have, or something becomes an item that's a reserve study item that wasn't in the past because it was less than 5,000, and now with inflation it's more than 5,000. So things like that. So we talked about the pools. We had some challenges at the beginning of this fiscal year in our pools, and we spent some allowance dollars for those, and those have materialized in here. So, but 79,000 for the first third of the year on 420,000 in allowance funds. So we're doing pretty good there. There are some uncertainties at Echo Mesa. Todd's been talking to me, and the well there is giving us problems. So we'll see what happens, but stay tuned for that. But through October, 79,000 spent. All right, switching to the fully funded balance. You know, we ended last year at 51%, and we budgeted 47% this year after paying for that $5.5 million irrigation project. And so basically, after paying for the $9.9 million that we just talked about in capital improvements, and everything's green up here, so we're on pace to hit that for sure. So we're looking pretty good through October on our fully funded balance percent. That completes my presentation.
Thank you, Cliff. You mentioned here on, really briefly, it comes up a lot, so I just wanted to ask you to repeat. When we have these really large projects, such as the Echo Mesa irrigation project, and there are others, you and the team are planning pretty far in advance for those, if you will, withdrawals, for lack of a better phrase. Sometimes we don't need to literally withdraw, but we're looking at those cash needs. Roughly how far forward are you guys projecting on a regular basis?
Okay, so we have our reserve study goes out 30 years. So, but we specifically hone in on 5 years
Right.
when we're looking at the reserve study, and we present that in the budget process. For example, one way of planning is this year, after our audited financial statements, we had 2.24 million in excess cash that we added to our reserve fund. We just executed that, of course, as you know, that transfer out of our operating account into our reserve fund. So we know that this year, after paying approximately 10 million in capital improvements, we're going to have to pull approximately 2.5 to 3 million out of the reserve fund at the end of the year based on our budget. So that's one aspect. That's one way that we plan for that, because we've engaged with CapTrust, of course, and they're setting that money aside and taking advantage of some of the shorter term investments that they can right now to get the best bang for our buck, knowing that we're going to need those funds in approximately a year from now. So, but yes, we plan for all those capital spends, and it's all planned out specifically for the next 5 years.
Thank you. I just wanted to repeat that. And as Cliff was alluding, part of the role of the treasurer working, on behalf of the association and all of us is that we work on, I authorize that transfer. So I was well aware of that happening. Even though we hear about it, there's a lot of stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So that's what Cliff was alluding. I'm well aware of that. The other question that I had, and this is reminding myself that governing board and our committees talk about the what and not the how. So I'm not trying to ask how, but I am aware many of our residents have expressed this and so forth. So I'm going to try to be careful in the way that I express it, but it's about how the staff is actually filling some of those vacancies. You've alluded to the fact that we have several open seats. As the staff goes through and looks at the openings, obviously we can see that there are literally open seats. Sometimes when we're going around, we can see that we're hiring. But do you, as a part of your operation, do you evaluate whether or not there's a need to continue to fill that? Any of the staff, do you evaluate whether or not there is a need, or as you go forward and fill?
Yes. So yes, we do. We evaluate it as we're operating our business, of course. We present it yearly in our budget. For example, Todd's golf maintenance team is typically the highest area of empty seats that we have. They're full-time positions, and they're not minimum wage employees. So the impact of those open seats are pretty significant when you have a rotating 4 to 6 at any point in time throughout the year. So that has the biggest impact. So we are evaluating that at all times to make sure that we're operating and we have the right budget for what we do. We also make moves throughout the year. So if there's an opportunity to, through efficiencies, create a part-time position to, instead of having a full-time position, we do that. If there's an opportunity, if it makes sense to combine 2 or 3 part-time positions into a full-time position, we make those decisions throughout the year as well. So there's things that happen throughout the year that change the dynamics of our seats, but yeah, we're constantly.
Thanks for that. I'll turn it to the committee for any other questions about our year-to-date financials through. Rick?
Cliff, just one question regarding the number of employees. It started the year out 14, now it's up to 20, okay? How long have some of those open recs been open? And like you said, how close are we to filling some of them?
Okay, so I would say the FTE value on that is about 9. So there's a lot of part-time positions that we have that are open. So between full-time and part-time, I would say there's a constant rotation. I mean, we lose people all the time, 483 seats in the budget. We're going to have turnover in especially part-time roles. And then on the full-time role side, again, the biggest chunk of that lies in the area where we need it the most, which is in our maintenance. So we're constantly looking at that, but we're always going to have a list of open positions. It's always going to happen. I'm looking for a purchasing position in the accounting department, which, by the way, we're moving back to part-time instead of a full-time position. But this is something that we manage with that many employees, with a broad range of things that we do here. It's always going to be, 10 to 20 people. It just is, especially when we're this time of year when business picks up.
One other question I thought was pretty interesting to see that our golf fees were down, but yet the fees from the bowling were up.
Yes.
So are we moving people from the golf courses into the bowling alley because of the heat and the overseat? Is there any
There
transfer?
could be some impact there for sure. But bowling is, it's picking up steam, which is good. And we've got a world-class bowling center. So, yeah.
Yeah, both our golf, we have the luxury, I guess, or the privilege that we have it's been rated, I believe, one of the best, if not the best, bowling facility in the state. That's why it's so busy. And our golf courses are also really highly rated, so we're lucky.
And also lawn bowling.
Yes.
I saw that facility. It's done really well.
Our lawn bowling facility. We have the president of the lawn bowling club is here with us, so. It was the World Championships, right? So, thank you, Rick.
I do want to plug Gary Zarek as well, our new bowling manager. He's done a phenomenal job in there, and we've had a lot of great feedback. So I think that's impacted as well.
Thank you. David?
I had two questions. One, Cliff, in one of the pages on the expenses for year-to-date, you mentioned there were $7,000 hours under budget. How much of that do you attribute to management versus FTEs that are open?
I would say 85% of that is open seats.
Really?
And I would say maybe 15% just efficiencies.
The reason for that question is just because it gives us a sense of how, the positions that are open and how that ultimately affects downstream. With that, the second question was, do we benchmark ourselves with like organizations in terms of our turnover rate of some type?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we're part of a group called Employers Council. So we get that data and those statistics. We're in the service business and we're in the recreation business. So a lot of the things we have to measure ourselves up against are government related sometimes. But I presented last year, our turnover rates and our tenure rates are twice that of industry standards. So we do benchmark ourselves, and we do look at that.
When you say, the longevity with the tenure, you mean for the turnover rate, you're better?
Yes, we're half.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes.
To follow up on that a little bit, Cliff, I remember this presentation it was Employers Council data.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember off the top of your head so we can refer ourselves back? I want to say it was last April, or it was was it mid-year or the end of year?
We did it at the GM Ops meeting earlier on in the year, and then we presented towards the end of the budget cycle.
Right.
We presented some data on our turnover rates as well as our wages.
Right, how we pay versus others comparable. So I'll go looking just so that the Budget and Finance Committee members know. I'll look for that because I remember it was really great information that would be insightful. It's in there in there being on board docs. It's in last fiscal year's Budget and Finance Committee presentations. I'll find that and send that out to you all. And for those of residents, if you're looking for that, it's the same thing. Just feel free to write to me on email and ask. It's all it would be available to you as well as to the committee. So if there's any interest, just let me know via email, christine.novello@suncitywest.com.
We'll present that the new data in this year's budget.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Again, some of the questions I've gotten about staffing and so forth, I think would really benefit from looking at some of that data as well. So thanks. Thank you, David. Anything else? Any other questions?
Yeah, Cliff, on the open FTEs in golf operations, have we had to use overtime to cover that work need?
Yes, we do use overtime. A lot of our overtime is just simply our overseating and the amount of hours that we have to put in. So we budget that portion of it, but there is a component of overtime that's worked to cover the hours for the people that aren't filled, for the seats that aren't filled. So yeah, there is, yes.
Okay. And then second, I'd like to give you accolade for the chemicals, buying the chemicals when you get a deal. I think that's really positive, yeah. Good job, Todd. Thanks.
Thank you.
Trust me, I was like, what? What are you doing, Todd? No, he's good.
Any questions, Chris? Jim?
I'm good, thank you.
John or Mickey?
I'm good, thank you.
Me too.
Excellent. Any questions or comments from our residents? So we have a few folks, for those of you watching at home, a few folks that are stepping to the microphone.
Bruce Lees, 135422. Not necessarily a question, but merely an observation. During the pool closure of R.H. Johnson resurfacing project, I don't even remember how many weeks it was closed. However, during my visits to the rec center there, I noticed that the positions were fully staffed, even including the snack bar. So that meant up to 4 employee monitors working every day during that pool closure, where the only function of the rec center was possibly the fitness center and checking on the men's club and whatever walk-around responsibilities they have. I asked some of the employees there, had they been offered time off? Could they take time off? Did they desire time off? And basically the answer that I got from all the employees that I questioned was they were told that they had to continue working, and even when they wanted to take time off, that was refused. And I thought that was kind of odd, being as that the facility was operating at less than 25% capacity. So I was wondering if there was some oversight missed, or if there was a plan to keep the people on the payroll because of loss of employees, or anything like that. Again, just an observation. I don't really expect anyone here to have an answer, but I figured I would throw it out there because it was kind of a craw in my side.
If either Cliff or Stephen want to respond briefly, it's really, I would leave that up to them because we're more policy, right? But that's a question about our operations. So what do you think?
Yeah, and it's a good question. There are, let's see, we have bocce, table tennis, golf, mini golf, the gym, the services that are provided at the gym as well, the health services that are provided there, and then the oversight of the tennis courts, the pickleball courts, and just overall safety and security of the facility. Unfortunately, we still have to monitor and do all those things. So the fact that the pool isn't open doesn't really help. It did help us on our maintenance, our overnight maintenance of the pool and things like that, because we weren't cleaning it and doing those sorts of things. Unfortunately, we kind of squeezed the balloon there, because then when we had to reopen it, we had to spend all those extra hours. So not a lot of savings there, unfortunately, with the pool closure.
And remember too, the team has already told us that there's some short staffing questions, and they are, if you will, we are fortunate to live in a service type of environment where there's a certain component of that, having a hopefully smiling face to greet you when you come in for some of those services is expected by our residents. So I can understand some of those decisions.
Yeah, if it was a business decision, like a profit and loss business decision, probably just close the whole facility. But that's unfortunately we're not in that. That's not our objective.
Thanks for taking the time to answer. If there are follow-ups from you, Mr. Lees, or from anybody, you can always go and speak to our general manager or members of the staff if you do have those questions, or fill out a comment form. So next, although again, I know many of the residents by name, I'll allow you to introduce yourself.
Nick Turner, 131829. First of all, just an observation and then a question, well, not an observation, but a statement, is that the results of that benchmark survey on salaries and wages next year, if I remember rightly, at the time, there was lots of talk about how we're just overpaying everybody. We give these people far too much money. And then, staff, please cover your ears. The benchmark survey showed that we're actually 18% below the average. We were, in fact, compared perhaps to some other similar organizations, we were, in fact, underpaying. So that's my memory of what happened on that benchmark survey. Anyway, my question is back to the salaries and the vacancies side of things. Is any part of the business actually suffering because we can't get the staff? You know, is the maintenance of the golf courses slipping or falling behind in some areas? Are we actually suffering harm because we can't get staff at the moment?
I'm happy to defer that to staff. I wouldn't know, but it's a great question.
Todd Patty will respond on the golf side.
On the golf side, yes.
Good morning. You know, in the golf maintenance division, it seems like we're always running like maybe 6 to 8 employees down, maybe even more than that during the summertime because of the heat. We're just not getting those people in. And that's really when we're the busiest on the golf course. Everything's growing, everything has to be cut and trimmed. And so we do suffer, especially in the detail work on the golf courses. When I drive around, I see things that aren't getting done. And it just, I have to step back a little bit and realize, you know, the number of staff that we have. So wintertime's a little bit easier, especially when we don't oversee the roughs, so we're not doing that. Our irrigation needs go down quite a bit. We're not trimming trees and plants as much in the wintertime. So it does help a little bit if we are short-staffed during those months. But, you know, that's short-lived because it's going to start picking up again probably April, May. Things start growing again. Bermuda comes out of dormancy. And so we're right back into it again. So summertime definitely is the toughest. But yeah, I think our golf courses do suffer at times. Again, with the detail work and just being, you know, cleaned up and looking sharp. And it's not where I want them. But I have to understand that, you know, we're kind of limited with our staff levels and trying to get people in the door. And hiring, you know, we've been hiring some people lately. Some are around. We still have some that are here. Some of them have worked a couple of days and then they just vanish. We don't know where they go. Maybe they just weren't cut out for golf course maintenance. And we find that to really be true during the summer months. Sure. In that heat, we get some of these younger kids coming in and they give it a try. And then after about 2 or 3 days with the heat, they're like, you know, I can't do this. And maybe they go find a job at a big box store or fast food or something. And where they're inside. And I don't blame them. It's tough work in the summertime out there. It really is. You have to be cut out for that, or you have to want to make that your career. You know, if you're going to be a greenskeeper and you want to climb up the ladder and you want to be irrigation or you want to be an assistant superintendent. But it seems like nowadays you just don't see that anymore. They just don't want that responsibility of those positions, those higher positions, whether it's an assistant superintendent or a superintendent. A little bit too much for them. So, and I've noticed that just over the last 10, 15 years, it's really declined. It used to be one time where you wanted to be, somebody wanted to be an assistant superintendent. He wanted to have his own golf course, and you just you don't see that anymore.
It's probably, anecdotally, I see that in other industries as well. But yes, I think in terms of keeping up, if I heard you correctly, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's certainly some things that are not up to your high standards, but are we suffering any irreparable harm? I think was one of the...
No, I don't think so. I think it's just we're not at the level that we were 5 years ago.
Sure.
And, you know, it's just, again, when I drive around and I see things that just aren't quite right. And it's mostly detail work, and I don't know if I'm the only one that sees that stuff. if the regular members
you do have,
and
we are very grateful for the fact that you do have such high standards. So I hope that those don't drop, but it is hard. So thanks for answering the question.
Oh, you're welcome.
And it looks like we have Carl as well. These are tough questions to answer, but we appreciate your.
No.
And we appreciate the opportunity to speak about it because, to piggyback off of Todd, no, the effects of having shortage of staff are not necessarily creating things that are irreparable, but things do suffer, or the useful life of some of our components. It really does hurt to not be able to fill the 24, 7 days a week service that some people might not, in this community, might not be aware that we have full night cleaning. And those are some of the hardest seats to fill. It's some of our largest vacancies in facilities operations sector of our business. And then the creativity that comes from some of our largest social clubs, it demands so much more of our hours to help support them, to keep the smiley face of the club presidents and the liaisons for some of the events that are happening in the social hall and the Summit Hall, Beardsley Park. And so it's hard to budget to that without sandbagging, and we don't. So we get into like Munchie Monday here. You know, it took an army to set that up the first time, and potentially those hours are stolen from the other activities of the week to keep the balance. So senior management jumps in, and you know, it's not free labor, but it's free labor. You know, it's not impacting the hours that we need our FAs to do setups in some of the other places. I often, you know, serve at night along with our other supervisors to do teardowns at night. But the loss of our staff and filling those positions, it's critical. And you have to have that balance of overage. People deserve their vacation time, even if they're part-time employees. They have the right to ask for some time off. So it's a balance. So I just thank you for letting me speak that.
Not at all. And again, I've seen it. If some of the residents have not, I've personally seen Carl, and I'm not, Carl just happened to be the person speaking. Many members of our staff, you will see them if you look carefully around the community and some of these really large events we run, you will see senior management staff who are, again, are paid on a salary and not subject to overtime out there at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, over the weekend, keeping our community safe and beautiful and really helping to fill in those holes. So I personally thank you for that. And I'm sure other residents, I've heard them speak about it. So thanks for the question. I hope that answered your question. Any other, I don't see any questions online. Are there any other questions about year to date? Then thank you, Mr. Swan. Thank you, Cliff. And we'll move on now to 3.04 to address our proposed capital improvement projects. And remember, these are not, no dollars associated with these. And we, as a committee, have thanked many times, but it's certainly, we thank you and your team, of course, Carl, but we also thank the Golf Committee and the Properties Committee and their chair people for including us in the tours, so that we are much more familiar this year with what's being proposed. But nonetheless, please walk us through it, Carl.
Terry, I'm just going to ask you to kind of flow with me in color. Thanks for having me today. This is really an exciting time of the year. All the conversations we've had over the last few months about capital project planning, and we are at that place where in November that we are getting ready to assess all those comments and recommendations from our committees. All this information that you're going to be hearing today has been part of a new strategy in presentational planning for capital projects. So each chairperson that has been involved in capital projects as part of their committee have had a document provided to them so that they are able to track and be aware of what the planning is. I want to thank this committee and for partaking in some of the tours with the Properties Committee. That was super helpful, I think, for yourselves. The input that you provided during those walkthroughs. The Properties Committee thanks you for coming along. Chartered Clubs members came along, and it really unified, I think, all the committee members in this new process of doing this. The biggest change was you had a list of projects that were being proposed without the conversation of the capital, which is generally most important to the BNF committee, so the capital cost. So I think it helped steer the committee to focus on what the request was, as opposed to sometimes getting lost in the numbers. So this is your final opportunity to hear the proposed capital projects list. The governing board at their workshop have already heard this list. And from this point, we'll be moving forward and giving the general manager the proposed capital projects with pricing, and we will begin discussions January, February, and March towards an approval of this proposed capital list. So I'd like to get started. And our first section here is the discussions of new proposed capital in the category of new capital. These are items that are not foreseen on a yearly basis through our reserve study tool that would be considered repair and replacement. First off, at Palm Ridge, we are asking for the painting of the interior pool area. This is a significant scope. The pools will most likely need to be drained. A scaffolding system will most likely need to be built, and then a full interior room paint. It's something that generally facilities maintenance helps with on our buildings, but the scale of this with the scaffolding that's involved, we don't have those kind of tools and equipment. We will need to go out for a vendor. Moving on, at Beardsley, the Clay Club and Glass Enameling Clubs both put in CR13 requests for room expansion. Again, I thank you for doing the tours of those areas so that you have an understanding of what the request was. Yesterday, the Chartered Clubs Committee had their special meeting for this particular conversation point because they were considered the sponsoring committee. Chartered Clubs is responsible for club requests, and after that meeting, the recommendation coming from the Chartered Clubs Committee is to not approve expansion in those areas. This line item, however, you will see continued on throughout the budget process because ultimately it's the governing board's decision to not propose this as one of the line items. I'd just like to mention that just a little further discussion after that Charter Clubs Committee between myself, Casey Huta, and the General Manager, Stephen Erno, we're just going to have a little further discussion on whether or not the glass enameling portion of this request deserves some attention for the fluidity of their club in a safe environment. So yesterday's Charter Clubs Committee, we expanded the original idea to giving them more options. The original option was going to affect the photography club and potentially have them relocated. Option 2 was to have a very minimal impact to them. And then option 3 was a opportunity for a full building expansion, not affecting the photography club at all. The option B is just an opportunity for us to discuss trading the Beardsley's operational offices with the porcelain painter's room and potentially opening up the space to glass enameling to have one fluid room. So that's the only thing that may be continuing on in discussion as the months go by. Moving on, we have the Beardsley mini golf shade cantilevers. Now that operationally we've requested of Todd Patty's crews to help clean up the dead trees and do some beautification in the mini golf thanks to his crews. We've had a lot of comments from the community about the loss of shade coming from that area. So we recognize that the opportunity for some shade cantilevers and keeping that a very bright and positive place, but yet having some comfort for the clubs and players. So we're proposing 6 cantilever shade canopies in the mini golf at Beardsley. And then over at the library, some displays and loft walls. As we know that the libraries had discussions for expansion or renovation, as libraries in the country change and become a little bit more of a social area as opposed to the old quiet book barn that they've been in the past. So in the interim time period, the team at the library would still like to develop some of the spaces creatively to help facilitate the change in the library. And in a few moments, when I read off repair and replacement items, that'll also include some tables and chairs. So the library would like some display walls and loft walls to kind of divide off areas of the library. That concludes the new capital portion of the proposed capital list. And next is repair and replacement items. We're going to start off our list with a big list of items for the sports pavilion. We are proposing that the pin setters be replaced in 25-26, 2 oiling machines, the bowling lanes gutter system, the bowling lanes division capping that caps the lanes between the actual bowling lanes, the masking unit graphics on the very back of the bowling walls, and then the subway ball track underneath, automatic bumper system, and the foul lights. So this is a very large improvement that has met its useful life for the bowling areas. As you know, last year all the lanes were replaced, and this is basically finishing the cycle of getting the bowling alley for its next 20+ years of use. As I mentioned a moment ago, the library also needs tables, chairs, and shelving. This is to replace some of the aged shelving, but it's also to help them facilitate new operations. The old round tables and chairs are very problematic for how multi-purpose use works out. It's hard to take a round table next to a round table and create a flow like you're experiencing here at your tables. With new square tables and chairs, the library will be able to give new opportunities, a lot less operational changes in that space by having the new tables, chairs, and shelving. Lawn bowling, Todd's team is proposing to regrass 2 of the courts. Over at the tennis courts at R.H. Johnson, replacement of the windscreens on all 16 courts. Facilities maintenance has a HVAC unit at R.H. Johnson that's due for replacement. Kuntz is the next facility for cardio equipment replacement. We replace cardio every 5 years on a rotational basis per rec center. The Kuntz softball outfield electronic scoreboard is on this list. However, discussions with the general manager, Cliff, in the CFO, and the softball club, we have been very positively approached by a sponsor, Liberty Buick. Those parties involved have all had discussions about how does this impact our policies on naming rights, and we've positively had a scoreboard there with naming rights. Liberty Field is about the name of the field. It's not about the car dealership, but the car dealership with a little plug for themselves is willing to pay for that scoreboard if we approve this project. Regardless, though, the scoreboard is due for repair and replacement, so if that isn't the case, it is on the reserve study and fully funded for replacement one way or the other. Moving on, Beardsley has 2 units for HVAC to be replaced. We're requiring an arts and crafts storage shed at the storage yard at the arts and crafts building. This replaces the fabric components. Every place that we have replaced our little airplane hangar of fabric storage, we've had nothing but positive results, less theft, more secure opportunities, and the structure lasts much longer than replacing fabric ones over and over again. The Beardsley pool area and patio furniture, the Properties Committee recommended this to be added. They saw a need for an updated furniture and fixtures, both in the pool and patio areas. Palm Ridge R&R for pool circulation pumps, a walk-behind scrubber for that new rubber decking, Palm Ridge's spa heater replacement. IT has 2 servers that are in need of replacement, And facilities maintenance has the need of a concrete saw walk behind to be replaced. That concludes typically other departments and the things that I manage. Moving on to repair and replacement is Todd Patty for the R&R for golf.
All right, thank you, Carl, and good morning again. This block here covers landscape maintenance, golf maintenance, and also golf operations. And I'll go through the golf operations real quick. You'll see there's a list of utility carts, whether it's for player assistants or janitors and those kind of things. But to go through the list for golf course maintenance for the capital improvement projects for golf maintenance, we have phase one, the Stardust Irrigation and Turf Reduction Project, and that is with a new pump station that we include in that. We have shoreline repair or hardscape for Deer Valley number 18 and Desert Trails number 14 and 18. And then we have a cart path slurry seal at Echo Mesa. This would be completed after the irrigation and turf reduction project. Capital improvement projects for the landscape maintenance division. As Carl mentioned, regrassing 2 of the greens over at the Johnson Lawn Bowl. We would use a new improved variety of Bermuda grass. We have a couple options that we could use, either Tiff Eagle or Mini Verde Ultra Dwarf Bermuda grass. I'm going to get that word out. And then on our equipment replacement for golf course maintenance, we have 22 units scheduled for replacement. Average age is about 18 years, and they range anywhere from 10 to 31 years. We did defer 4 units out of that list this year, 2 greens mowers and 2 aerifiers, 1 for greens and 1 for fairways. And then our utility vehicle replacement, again for golf maintenance, 7 units scheduled for replacement. Average age is about 12 years, and they range anywhere from 12 to 15 years. And we deferred 6 units out of that list this year, 4 utility carts, a dump truck, and 1 pickup truck. And so this is just part of the process every year with the equipment. We evaluate what's up for replacement on the reserve study, and we check and see how much money have we been putting into that unit. Is it still out and running? Is it cutting good as far as a mower? And we're not putting any money into it, then we're going to hold on to it for another year or 2 years, whatever that might be. But we'll push it out either to the following year or other years after that. And then our equipment replacement, our utility and equipment replacement for landscape maintenance. We have 2 utility carts scheduled for replacement and 1 walk-behind greens mower that's used over there at the Johnson Lawn Bowl. The average age of that equipment is about 11 years. And then we deferred 8 units off of that list this year. Some mowers, a tractor, greens rollers, some carts, pickup truck, and a heavy-duty utility cart that we deferred off of that list. So, and I think that covers that.
Todd, last year, if I remember, we had a dump truck, or one of our trucks was 35 years old. I mean, do we have a winner in terms of how old some of our, do you have a, I just wanted to say this, not only for a little bit of fun, but to point out to everybody how long we hold on to our assets as long as possible. Thanks to all of our staff pitching in for maintenance, we're able to preserve. Just off the top of your head, I'm sorry to mean.
Yeah, I think we do have 1 unit out there. I'm not sure where it's at, but I think it's 31 years.
There you go.
On that one this year. So didn't beat the 35, but pretty close.
Close. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And just to finalize this, also in the golf side of things, Desert Trails has a roof tile replacement. We have
right.
Deer Valley also with a Pro Shop roof tile replacement. And then Trail Ridge has a patio resurfacing on the back patio. And that concludes our capital proposed list that will be going to the general manager on December 1st with pricing. We will also be sending that out to our chairpersons on the governing board for December review. That way you're in the know and prepared for your January discussions, and we look forward to that. So if there's any questions.
Questions from the committee? And again, as just to amplify what Carl just said, the process is a little different this year in terms of we're trying to, we've been able to see things and actually see what the projects would be before considering the cost. So once we actually receive the priced budget from staff, I'll pass that on to the committee overall. In the next calendar year, it's all part of our fiscal year. Coming up in our calendar year, we'll hear a lot more of that, and that's the reason why we've been doing so many of our, if you will, housekeeping and policy reviews earlier in our operating year so that we could dedicate time. So we're looking forward to that. Rick, question?
The only, it's not really a question, is that I did the tours with your group.
Thank you, Rick.
And this brings it home to actually see what needs to be replaced versus just a conceptual viewpoint. Actually saw Palm Ridge and what needs to be painted and how to physically get up there and do that was just, it brought this to light. So I want to thank you and Kay for giving out those tours. They were extremely helpful. So
You're welcome.
David?
Yes, I also made a number of the tours, and I just wanted to emphasize the grassroots input you had from organizations, like on the Clay Club and the Glass Enameling Club. I mean, I know that's a difficult issue, not to take any position on it, but just basically, I like the way that you or the organization has set input from the grassroots up, and then there's people that make decisions. That helps us as in our roles here to understand this is what the members feel is the best interest of the organization.
We always try to, especially myself, the difficult part here is that you have very creative, passionate folks that, take part in their clubs. The presidents are a representation of the members of those clubs. And, I certainly want to honor a good idea. There's never a bad idea. The idea is going to get its recommendation from you, the committees. So I try to be Switzerland and stay neutral. I try to give the best idea to, if there's going to be a positive direction, we have to be prepared. So, and again, to give credit to all the hard work that the Charter Clubs Committee did, they came to the final consensus that they are not giving that recommendation this year based on, they feel that more data needs to be presented on going past our comfort zone of what our typical hours of use are. The 8 to noon, everybody loves to use their club space, and they're asking for the clubs to reevaluate and see if they can squeeze a little bit more out of their day.
one other question. Is there going to be a reconciliation between what you're proposing here and what is on the capital reserve study? Something that's missing in between, or something that you're going to delay, or those type of things? Because if we're using the capital reserve study to drive some of the things in the future, I want to make sure that we've got some of these covered or delayed.
I'll answer it first and then defer to our staff if I've misstated anything, but that's just part and parcel. A lot of the reserve study really forms the initial basis for what Carl is referring to as R&R, the repair and replace. And then the staff just goes through that together with various various committee representatives as well to see, can we defer some of that? We heard just now from Todd Only saying, we looked at this and we're going to defer a certain number of line items. So it does happen organically in terms of how this list is created. It's not just automatically rolled forward to spend the money. I think it's evaluated, how it's evaluated and what we see. This is part of the questions that we go for our tours and we can actually see for ourselves what's up for replacement physical plant. We don't see as much of it on some of the things that are happening behind the scenes, like operationally and what's happening in some of our office spaces and so forth, but we can see that if we need. That's my take, and now I defer to team.
Cliff, may I have for a moment? So July 1st of each year, we open up the reserve study tool that we're actually looking at virtually every day anyways, but it's kind of the date that starts the bulk list. And through the first 2 months of the summer, there are multiple items that actually came due. This flooring in this room, for example, for replacement. So myself and the department's management We walk those spaces together. So this list that you see here is already the vetted list from an operational standpoint. We've already deferred hundreds of thousands of dollars to a future date. So let's just say we put an extra 2 or 3 years and then reevaluate this flooring in 2 to 3 years. So that gets done ahead of time. And I think if you go back to the September meeting, I mentioned some of the amounts or those line items at that point. So, and then another great thing is that you saw the areas that you walked with the properties tours in case there was something not on the reserve study that maybe needed improvement. So, and then that would either be implemented in this proposed list or a future date assigned. Hope that helped.
Did that answer? Any other, any questions from anyone else? Chris?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, John, go right ahead, and then we'll go to you, Chris.
Oh, did I interrupt there? I can go second.
Oh, no worries, go right ahead.
This is maybe a two-part question, but I would also like to say that being included in those property tours was a great experience and very helpful. So thank you very much. When I was able to participate in 2 of them, and when we were at the Kuntz, we spent some time on the tennis courts there, and they are not very well used, and 3 of them are locked off. I was wondering, Carl, was there any discussions of any item to go in the budget to use that facility in the 25-26? And I guess the second question, maybe for you, Christine, was I thought at one point there was a proposal to do kind of and it might have been by the board, to do kind of a feasibility, put some money to a feasibility study. And I was wondering if that's a dead idea or where that sits.
I'll answer, or I'll take a first stab at those, and then we'll defer to you. Both items, John, and for anybody else who's wondering, are still under consideration. You don't see it yet in the budget for probably a variety of reasons. It's not that it won't ever come back, but I think the overall study and the strategic direction of what we're going to do a little bit is taking a bit of a precedence. And that's something that's being led not only by the governing board, but together with Stephen Erno, our general manager, and staff. What is it that, what are our priorities going forward? And I think that's a discussion that's happening or will be happening first before we decide how to proceed forward with. But that area is renovating that area and returning it to a fuller use is something that I believe staff and all of us want to see. How we do that and when is, I think, the question. Is that fair, Carl?
Yes, and I think the most positive takeaway is that the Kuntz tennis facility is a fully recognized asset in our reserve study tool. So there are the major components of that facility that are tracked, already saved for the future date that a determination of some form of improvement, whether it's to bring it back to its glory as a tennis facility or reimagine it as something else. So know that this isn't a direct impact to the budget because the funds are being tracked for the assets that exist there. I think that's the biggest takeaway. Properties Committee has not recommended anything, and nor has any other committee to date. So if I don't hear a recommendation, and technically it's a little late in the process, respectfully, we have no plans currently other than, as you said, the general manager is aware about
it's not dead
future planning.
It's not dead in that we'll certainly continue to use that and restore it to a fuller use at some point. How and when, still under consideration. So that's why it's not in the current, to my knowledge. So, but don't for a minute think that anyone's ignoring it. Far from it. So.
Thank you.
So now, Chris?
Thank you. Yeah, I've got two items. One was maybe a suggestion is when doing the tours and we saw the storage sheds, it's really unsightly to see such a variety of storage sheds, right? Some look like they came out of Kmart, some look like they're the most professional. So I hope we take some consideration and try to create some consistency. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have them at all, right? But we need them, and some of them look very, very good and professional, and some don't.
So that is been the goal. So I'll say to date, one, we are short on storage, period. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Based on how our clubs continue to grow and their needs for storage and our needs for storage, creating efficiencies like having more tables as opposed to having so much table movement through staff and extra labor. At R.H. Johnson, we've done a Connex to date, which is the same structures that we have in that location already, so that I would say that's a matching thing. And then everywhere else, generally, the tough shed, industry style shed has been ordered to replace any of our cheaper fabric, like you said, different styles. Some look like a tent, some look like an airport hangar. So we are consistently doing structural lean-to sheds. We have one now finished at Palm Ridge, Zymergy, Bocce, this proposed one here, and I can't think of any other offhand, but so uniformity is very important, and they're always painted to match our buildings. Oh, I know Sports Pavilion has theirs. So I think we're definitely trying to make aesthetics as important as the purpose.
Good. That's good to hear. My second question is regarding R.H. Johnson's small tiles and R.H. Johnson's pool. When I did walk with the properties department, and I'm also a user of that pool, and those small tiles, in my opinion, are beyond their useful life.
At the fountain areas?
Around the fountain areas. They're not only are they stained, but when some are missing, and then when you look closely at them, they're actually decaying from the excessive stain. So I left that tour thought it was a foregone conclusion that replacement of those tiles would be on a list. So I inquired to the properties department, and they said it was a maintenance item.
So just be aware that there are two budgets each year. One is capital, and the other is our operating. So there are items that we perform that fall under either less than $5,000 in cost to fix, repair, or replace. And in this case, right now, we are tracking this as an operational expense to refurbish. It's potential that over the next month or two, based on collecting, because it takes some time to get this, who's the right vendor, what's the cost. So it's potential that something could be added to this list that we find out it's not an operational expense and it becomes a capital expense. And then you would be just made aware as that time goes by.
Okay, yeah, I just looked for it to be documented somewhere that something's going to be done. I didn't see it at this
It's
time.
on the properties tours list, and Russ and I honor that list very, complete it or get it on a list for repair and replacement.
All right, thanks, Lasker.
Jim, any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to second or third or fourth or fifth the tours. Very, very informative. Quick question. On the roofs, the pro shops, on the tile, it says replace. I guess there's multiple questions. What's the life cycle of the tile roof? And then are we actually replacing the tiles, or is this an underlayment issue? And one last thing, are we having current issues with these roofs to warrant the replacement of these, or is this just a life cycle thing?
It's definitely based off a life cycle. No, I mean, we have our typical here and there leak where we take out of a new ceiling tile and replace it. But this is R&R repair and replacement. So our philosophy is that before we have a problem, fix the problem. So they have met their useful life as far as the felting goes underneath. In most cases, no, we don't replace the tile, so that's hence the lower cost that you see here. But it is a tile removal, felt replacement, and then tile reinstall. And only times at the other pro shapes, this has been completed, is that if there's been a lot of damaged tile or the tile, to kind of fit and fill the voids where damaged pieces, because when you take off tile roofs, some of them break. If we can't find a matching color, then the proposed budget shows a full tile replacement. And I think the only place I've done that is at Palm Ridge and gone to the new cementatious style. But some of our pro shops, we have some areas of overstock from 40 years ago. And so this is a restoration. We use the term replacement because it helps track in our tool a little different. But it's a replacement of the felt.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. So we're just R&R in the tar paper.
And then we'll get another, by felt warranty, if you will, which doesn't really exist.
No.
Who's going to pursue that?
Yeah.
It's approximately 25 to 30 years.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Excellent. I was just looking for clarification when I saw the tile replace. And then the other is, I see the patio resurface and tillage. Isn't that a concrete slab?
It is, and right now it is basically like a acrylic surface, meaning I think years ago somebody put down like a cool deck kind of variated cementatious subsurface there and then painted it year after year. We found great success by doing the epoxy chip coats at some of the other pro shops. And so instead of just repainting it, we're going to put the epoxy chip coat and get the long, useful life.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mickey, any questions from you? Okay.
Sorry.
That's
It
okay.
took me a minute to get off mute. No, I'm great. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, thank you, Carl. Thank you, Todd. We'll look forward anxiously to the exciting part of the year where we get to the next step. So thank you again for all the hard work. We are coming up on, we're closing in on the end of our second hour. So team, there is something really important that I want to make sure that we cover this. So assuming that no one needs a break just yet, I'd like to power through for another few minutes. So we're going on to 3.05. And specifically what we're going to do here is talk about our investment policies, FI12 and also the related FI4. Those kind of go together because big part of what we do as a committee, it's not the sexy part of what we do as the committee, but we do annually review all of our policies. For those of you who have been participating, and we heard a little bit about this earlier because we did talk about our investments and so forth. The big thing that this committee's been talking about and wrestling with since we convened in person in September is how to evaluate the investment policies, FI12 and related FI4 as well, on reserve funds. So at our last meeting, I asked and mentioned to the committee that we would circulate within the committee, do we have any proposals for what we would change in either of those two and why we would analyze, what we would analyze and how we would analyze. And it's very difficult to cover all of the details in such a way that would be transparent to the community as well. So what I'm suggesting to our committee is that we form a working group to study our investment policies. We, of course, being a policy group, we do have a policy for working groups now, and it's under CO5. So in reference to that, we could pull up, if someone could pull up the attachment proposal for a working group. Thank you very much, Terry. So what I'm proposing is that we form a working group in accordance with CO5, that this working group would be studying or analyzing our reserve fund investment policies, FI4 and FI12. So if we go on to the next page. The subject matter there, as I just mentioned, right? What we need to do in concurrence with the policy is that make sure that we have timelines, how we would do this, and who would be a part of it. So I'm going to walk through what I'm proposing to you, and then we can talk about whether or not there are any questions about this. First of all, we would start today, specifically with the working group, and we would wrap this up hopefully by March, right? Again, we're looking at the conclusion of the working group itself. Should we convene this working group, may decide that they need more or less time, but it would be at least that long, but not much longer than spring of this year. I propose 2 working group members, Mickey Jacobs and Rick Ruffey, specifically. I would serve as an advisor to that, specifically from the governing board and on the policy side. And of course, Cliff Swan would be an advisor as well, as we usually do with these working groups. So we keep the working groups small, limited to what we'd be covering. If we go to the next slide that you might have seen, we could talk about the specifics of dates. Everything in a working group, should we put one together, is in full view of this committee and what we would do with a working group of this nature. Since it's something of such interest to our community as a whole, we want to make sure that everything is done with full transparency and participation, right? So the first thing we would do is ask Mickey and Rick to come back to us as a committee at our next meeting with what will be analyzed, why it's important, and what other resources would be needed to complete the entire analysis. Also, those 2 members would consider, do they need additional people? Do they want additional people to be fully participating analysts, if you will, part of the team? Any other resources that are needed, we would hear about that at our next session. Going into January, we would, at each of our meetings, we would receive a committee update, and so would all of our residents. And by February, we would have some recommendations coming out from that working group. We'll give updates to the governing board starting in February until the working group has wrapped up, whether it's in March or if that work does need to translate into April as well. But again, the first thing is that we convene the working group to look at these 2 investment policies, and specifically, as we were talking about earlier, are we doing the right thing for our association? No one disputes the fact that we want to be very astute in how we're actually managing our funds, but remember, these reserve funds are our collective investment together as owners of this community, right? Each of us who are owners, we, if you will, buy into the community. So we own all of this and we own the outcomes. But unlike those of us who are planning for our retirement, we also have to think for a community that we hope and expect will be in existence decades, if not hundreds of years from now. It's a nice, grandiose thought, but seriously, this community will outlive each and every one of us who are currently living here. That's our goal. So do we have the funding capable to sustain us going forward? Does our current investment policy enable us to do that? Does it protect our investments and so forth? So I propose that we do form a working group to actually dive in and do the analysis that we've been talking about through the past few months, and open it up now to and thank Mickey and Rick, by the way, for being voluntold. I think that was the, but I asked them to step up and to participate, but I welcome the input from the committee first in terms of what we would do with the working group with what I've outlined for the proposed deliverables and timing and so forth. I'll start with, I guess I'll start with John. We'll leave Mickey and Rick to the end. John, any questions or concerns?
I support the outline.
Chris?
Process check. So I certainly support the effort. I understand the effort.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to derail any of their work, but I might have an idea or two. So I understand that we have to be careful not to send bulk emails to the committee, right? Could be considered a meeting. But if I had 1 or 2 points that I wanted to forward to them in an email,
absolutely.
It would be the 2 focus group leaders, yourself and Cliff.
Actually, you could forward it to everybody. I would just ask, we can talk about in terms of the actual process, for how we would do that. We just have to be careful to not reply to all, and then it becomes a conversation which may be construed as a meeting. That's where we
Right,
have to
right,
be
yeah, just
concerned,
trying to
right?
be careful here.
The other thing, Chris, just process, I may not have said this, but each one of these meetings is open not only to all the members of the committee, but it's open to all residents, all owners specifically. So the committee, although it's not required by our policy CO5, this particular one, should we all continue to move forward with it, every one of these meetings would be held with, it would be posted to board docs in terms of the meeting time and place. The meeting time and place will be here on our campus, if you will. We don't have the facilities to necessarily open up everything to remote participation, but at least residents will be invited to that. Everything will be posted. So every one of us can participate and attend, if you will, each of those meetings to see, and that it goes for all residents as well. And yes, by all means, if you have ideas and questions as committee members, you could go, we'll come up with a process to make sure that that gets funneled. We want to make sure if we have a working group, this one or any, that we work as quickly and expediently as possible. So we don't want to wait a whole month to hear that input. We want this to move forward and to be able to meet some pretty short deadlines. So great question. Did I answer that? Okay. Jim, you were looking down, so I didn't get a chance to add any input or questions.
Yeah, knowing the I guess my question is, we're using our BNF meetings as a working meeting?
No. These would be, a working group is convened to work outside of in addition to our budget and finance. We'll receive updates so that everybody can hear about them. So the committee and all residents who attend will get updates at each one of our meetings. But no, these would be in addition. So the working group will, assuming we convene one, would schedule meetings in addition to our meetings. And they can meet as frequently as they wish, but they'll always be posted so that all of us and our fellow residents can participate.
Okay, so I see the 17th and the 21st, these are BNF meetings.
Those are the deliverable dates.
Okay.
So that would be the time by which
Okay.
at each of our meetings we would
But there'll be
receive
other
an update.
meetings for others to participate in as we
But
go.
we can, everyone on this committee and every resident
Okay.
could at least
Yep.
attend and listen.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
No, thanks for the clarification questions. Ed, any? Thanks. David?
No, I think that helped clarify both the two previous questions and answers. That helped clarify some things for me. Thank you.
Excellent. So Rick and Mickey, assuming we move forward as a committee, you guys are okay with you had some great ideas that you wanted to consider, so this gives you the opportunity to dive in and do the analysis. So
Yes, thanks, thanks, Christine, and thanks to the committee members. And what I would say is that I think that we would welcome anyone's ideas. I think that there's been a lot of discussion, pretty much through this year or so far, about the investment policy, that people are concerned. Is it adequate? Does it meet our needs? Is it effective? Is it too stringent? All of those things. And what I would like to say is that I believe in a data-oriented approach on anything like this, which means you look at investment returns over multiple asset classes over many years, and you match that up with the needs of the community. What do you need in terms of cash flows? When do those cash flows both occur, coming in and coming out? And you look at it in terms of what investment policy best meets the needs of the community for adequate cash flow and also protection of your assets by giving you maybe a little bit better rate of return.
Very well said, and thanks again, Mickey. Anything else, again, Rick, that you wanted to add to that? I think
I have the same approach, and I think it came out. I have, and that's why I'm asking some of these questions regarding the, capital reserve and all that, because you've done a lot of work that's already there, and we can use those to determine what's all historical information on where we need to go. And I'm in this because I'm here for the community. I'm not here for myself. I'm here for the community to make sure that we can extend going forward. And have we limited ourselves too critically to, not make up for what's happened over the last year through inflation, through all these other programs that have gone through. So I'm all for it, so.
I applaud the fact that we're all in agreement as, again, budget and finance. We love our facts and figures, but that is the most important thing, that this will be a data-oriented approach. I want to assure any residents and so forth that are listening in, again, this will be done with transparency, with a lot of focus on that data and analysis. The expected outcome from the working group, as you can see laid out in the slides that we went through, is that there'll be a recommendation to the committee. The committee itself will also have a recommendation that it will make to the governing board, one way or the other. We could either say, as a committee, that we've decided after analysis to retain everything as is. We could say whatever the questions are, but that recommendation goes to the governing board. The governing board will make the decision. So nothing will be done under the covers. Everything will be done with full transparency and data, so I don't want anyone to panic. That's all about that. But again, it's something that we're doing our due diligence as committee members, as Budget and Finance Committee, and making that recommendation to the governing board. So with that, in essence, CO5 asks that that each committee agree to form a working group. So I judge by your comments that there are no dissenters, but just a real quick, if there are any objections or concerns, it's please voice them now. That's great to hear, or lack thereof. Any comments or questions from our residents? I don't see anything online. Okay, then. And for those who are listening in, I did have an interruption in my internet while we were going forward. So if I did miss, if you typed a question and it was not read, please put something into chat again. It looked like for a minute there that I had lost the ability to see chat. So with that, I would assume by consensus that we've formed the working group that was just outlined. And thank you, Mickey and Rick, for taking this on. The first thing they're going to do is put their heads together and figure out the best timing for a kickoff meeting. And they'll give us some ideas so that Cliff and I can evaluate our availability. I have the ability to see Cliff's overall calendar, so I can work with you on that. So come up with what dates you want. We will make sure that that gets posted so that everyone in the community is aware of the kickoff meeting and any meetings that come up. Thanks, team. We are a little past 2 hours now. We have, I think it's going to go really quickly in these next two items, but if it looks like we need more time, we will defer those to our following meetings. But let's keep powering through, shall we? 3.06, we have 7 policies that were up for review in this particular period. I'm going to go to my notes here. What we've done is we've taken all of our policies that are in all of our financial policies, and I've divided those up across various team members. So Mickey Jacobs has reviewed FI01, and we have all seen, I believe you've had the chance to see, Mickey had a few very minor, or by her words, minor changes that she was proposing to FI01. Are there any questions or concerns for Mickey's changes from any members of the committee?
So was that posted on the, yes?
It was.
So
If you have you had a chance to see those? And if not, Mickey, you can give us a real quick brief, if you are able. If not, I can do that on your behalf.
I did. I printed it. I just wanted to make sure we're, a couple questions on it. The consistency of the format with our policies. As you can see, the front is just, I mean, it's lacking the same format structure as all of our other policies.
I think what you were looking at is just a draft to make it a little bit easier. It would be reformatted so that it has the same Sun City West icon at the top, and the same format would be followed. I think just to save a little bit of time for us, this was just presented to us so you could see the substance of text.
Okay.
So it will be properly formatted.
And then the second was, there's kind of a lot going on in this all-in-one policy. I see that we're trying to define capital expenditures, capital asset construction projects. Rather than that being general, other policies, the structure, the label would be definitions rather than general.
What we're trying to do, we covered last month, I think what we're trying to do is go through and make, ensure that our policies are serving our community overall. And some of our policies, we noted in our last meeting, we probably need an end-to-end review of all of our policies to ensure that readability, are we missing anything? Are we duplicating efforts and so forth? So again, would you like to reformat this policy to have a different title for 2.0? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I'm just, again, it's a matter of readability, consistency with all of our policies.
Yeah, can I interject for a minute on this particular one? So I looked at all of the policies, and I'm going to tell you there is not a lot of consistency. There is another policy that I marked up considerably for exactly that reason. I did not try to, what I did with this particular policy is simply take the areas that, for example, where I marked out the fact that we decided to do depreciation in 1990. That is unnecessary and does not need to be included in the policy, so I removed it. And then clarified the definition of a purchase price, that it's not just the purchase cost plus installation, it is the purchase cost plus everything related to its acquisition. And those are really the only changes that I made to this policy. If we are going to do an end-to-end, is every single policy put together in exactly the same way? There is a huge amount of work that needs to be done.
We covered that, Mickey and Jim. We covered that or attempted to in our last meeting, where we talked about the need to do a more comprehensive end-to-end view to ensure that we are covering what we need to and doing it in the best way possible. What we agreed, I believe, stop me if I'm wrong, but what we agreed at our last meeting was to move forward and initially do a review of each existing policy to ensure that it is serving our community, period. And then at the end of the policy reviews that are required and mandated by our bylaws, at the end of our budget cycle, which is also date-driven, right? We need to complete that, dive into and make sure that we have adequate resources to complete our budget reviews. Sometime in the next calendar year, so after January, we'll figure out our timing and our bandwidth to do this end-to-end review and make sure that we are allocating some time to make a recommendation on how to true that up. That was my, did I get that right? It was David, I think that.
Yeah, that's correct, Christine. We had this discussion and that undertaking a comprehensive review of all the policies was going to take a bigger undertaking. And we prioritized the FIO 4 and what is it, 4 and 12, that needed to have a real focus right now, and to get that done in a time frame that could then be approved by the governing board, so that it was in place as we begin next fiscal year. We can plan that. I think there was a general consensus that there is a need to look at all the things that's been mentioned, plus some more. I know I had a couple policies too that I would recommend some changes, but I think we felt that rather than spending our time on that right now, let's get through these first two and then do more of a comprehensive initiative
End-to-end.
to do all the policies in one failed swoop, and really put some time into it, which is going to be required.
So that's, so Jim, I understand and applaud the fact that we want to chew everything up and make it more readable, make it more digestible and more useful, frankly. But that was how we decided last month to proceed forward,
Okay.
right? Just a matter of priorities and timing to make sure that we have enough time to do one review of all of these substantial policies, dedicate an effort for 12 and 4, and make sure that we have the time allocated to review our budget. And then we'll decide next year. And personally, again, both as a governing board member, as a resident, I would love to see us do the review that we talked about in our last meeting. It's just a matter of figuring out the right time to get that started. So hopefully, looks like now that we've formed our first working group, we might have another one teeing up sometime next year. It's just a matter of figuring out when. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I guess I'm kind of stuck on whether the other two items that I had are even worth mentioning. Yeah.
Mention them. I mean, we're not trying to
No.
to shut you up. It's
No,
just a matter
yeah.
of saying
I guess from my standpoint, I hate, and I mean HATE, hate touching things twice. And so what we were told to review and take a look, and only to just, and then go back at the
Yeah, you don't
next
have
year
to.
and
You,
do
you
it
don't have
again.
to agree. It was just a
Yeah.
matter of priorities.
Understood.
And making sure we had the bandwidth to focus on the
Enough
budget
said.
reviews, right?
Yep.
But I hear what you're saying. It's inefficient at
Yes.
best to do that. But rather than undertake a really deep rewrite of each of these, some of these policies we felt may not even be needed.
Agreed,
Right,
and that was,
and so to do that with 8 individual people doing that on their own seemed like that would also be inefficient. So I know I hear what you're saying. I do. But we'll move
Yep.
forward. And I also hate touching things twice. It seems to strike me as inefficient, but in this case, it seems like the better way forward to me as well, and I concur with the committee.
Christine, I would just say that I think this initial assessment by us was a useful effort. So we understood the comprehensiveness that needs to be done. And then what we've done is now taken an approach that would do the priority of these first two. I think we'll also learn from these first two, what went right and how what went wrong and how we can make it better, so that we do take on a comprehensive review of all the remainder policy. We probably do it best in an efficient fashion. But
Okay.
I think that looking at them, it become a reality for us that they all need to be looked at. I would concur.
Okay. So, so again, I guess I'm entertaining, Mickey's outlined a couple of changes that would, that she believes are important to improve in FI 01. Jim, do you want to defer that for more analysis and study, or, because I know you have some other questions?
I'm good to roll forward with whatever you guys want to do.
You're also you'd be fine to dissent. You don't have to agree just to agree, so.
Yeah, understood. I mean, yeah, I'm good.
So Christine, so what I can also say is, if we really wanted to prefer if we really just, this particular policy is not, it's not terrible on its face. It can be read, you can figure out what a capital asset is. I think that we can also say we've decided not to make any changes until we do a more thorough review. I think it is okay to make that decision.
Would that rest a little more easily with you?
Yes, yes, it
Okay.
would. I mean, to go in there and dot an I and to cross a T and only to come back and run it through the meat grinder next year, yeah, it just seems, yeah.
Okay. So this month we were looking at FIO1, FI2. Rick took a look at FIO2. We looked at 05 insurance. John Click took a look at that. Looking at David was assigned to look at 11 disbursement and let's see, as well as petty cash, 20. And we also had Ed look at 15 and 16. And Ed, I think you just had one note on 15, if I remember correctly. Not so much a change, but making sure that we are adhering to the annual plan policy because we've changed the policy.
Yes, as long as the governing board is in sync with that, which we know they are based on their discussions. There does not need to be a change of the dates.
So we can recommend no changes. So in other words, there'll be no recommendation to make the changes in FI1 at this time. We haven't seen anything that substantially requires review until we do this end-to-end review that we've been mentioning. Everyone, we're in consensus on that? Do we want to make any sort of a recommendation for ourselves, not necessarily the governing board? Do we want to put on notice for our own actions that we intend to do an end-to-end review this year? All right, so let's note that in our meeting minutes, that it's I don't believe that it was explicitly called out, so we'll give ourselves the action to consider forming a team to do that end-to-end review, and we'll make sure that we hold ourselves accountable to come up with the time frame for that no later than January. How's that sound? So at least we have a time, it's the plan for the plan, we used to call this in the corporate world, but by our January meeting, we'll at least make a decision on when we're going to do that end-to-end review and how. Does that sound fair?
Yep.
All right. So with that, we've covered agenda item 3.05, 3.06. There'll be no recommendation for 3.07, if I heard the team correctly. Are there any comments from, well, I don't even think we have any residents left. We've driven them away. I hope that's not the case. We do have residents, we have 12 folks watching online. Are there any comments or questions from anybody who's here, including committee? Okay, hearing none. Moving on to section 4.01, any committee comments? We'll start with Mickey.
Nope, I am good.
John?
I'm good.
Excellent. We'll start with Jim in the room.
Yep, good, thank you.
Chris?
Nothing for me.
Ed?
No comments.
No comments.
Okay. I don't think there are any residents, but if there are any other questions or comments, raise your hand. Great. So with that, we've formed a working group today. There'll be meetings that will occur between now and into December. I see no need for our meeting on December 3rd, so unless there's an objection, we'll cancel that. Further, we have a meeting identified for, I believe it's January 2nd would be the first Tuesday in December. I would like to go forward and cancel that one as well, unless it's a holiday period, and I don't believe we're going to have a lot of new work. If there are any concerns, you can let me know. We'll go forward and cancel both of those meetings. Therefore, our next committee meeting will be on December the 17th, 2024 at 9 a.m. right here. For those watching and listening, you can look for further announcements for the first meeting of the Investments Working Group. With that, I adjourn the meeting at 11:19. Thank you for your patience.